The crystal glass in Lester King's hand trembled, though not from age. He had survived hostile boardrooms and sleepless nights, but nothing unsettled him like the sight before him now. His only son staring across the desk with a hunger that didn't belong in a family home. "5 million, Dad," Dennis said, his voice tight, urgent. "You've got 32. Just help me out. It's nothing to you." The ink on the sale contract was still wet, the 32 million deal that marked the end of 3 decades of sacrifice. Lester had imagined freedom, travel, quiet mornings, and finally dignity. Instead, his son's demand made the triumph taste like ash. Behind Dennis, Wendy lingered in the doorway. Arms folded, her smile too polished for the intimacy of family. She didn't speak, but her silence spoke volumes. Every glance she gave Dennis was a cue. Every flicker of her eyes a strategy. Lester set the glass down slowly, deliberately. The mahogany desk between them still bore the dents of late nights when Dennis, a boy of 10, used to sit there with crayons, drawing imaginary office buildings, promising, "One day, Dad, I'll help you run it." Now that boy was gone. "You didn't even congratulate me," Lester said quietly. The words carried more weight than he expected. "Not a word about what this means." Dennis shifted, his jaw tightening. "Congratulations. You built an empire. But come on, what's 5 million when you've got 32? Lester leaned back in his chair, studying the man his son had become. The expensive watch. The restless tapping fingers. The impatience of someone who thought wealth was inheritance, not earned sweat. He felt Wendy's gaze, sharp and unblinking, like a blade across his skin. "You think this money is nothing," Lester said, voice breaking into steel. "It's 30 years of your childhood birthdays I missed. It's nights I fell asleep at this desk with a cold sandwich, because payroll had to clear in the morning. It's everything I built so that you—" He stopped, his chest tightening. "So that you'd never have to beg." Dennis's face hardened. "I'm not begging. I'm asking for what's mine." Silence stretched between them. The house creaked in the late afternoon light. Outside, the yard where Dennis once played catch lay in shadows. Wendy stepped forward at last, her voice syrup smooth. "Dennis just wants to build something of his own. Isn't that what you've always taught him?" Lester almost laughed. "Build." The word felt foreign in her mouth. He closed the contract folder with finality, the snap echoing like a gavel. "This isn't a negotiation. You'll both come to the party tomorrow, smile and celebrate. Or you won't. That's your choice." For a moment, no one moved. Then Dennis slammed his fist on the desk, rattling the glass and the past it carried. His eyes burned with something Lester had never seen before. Entitlement sharpened into menace. As they stormed out, Wendy glanced back over her shoulder. The smile she gave was thin, practiced, dangerous. And for the first time, Lester wondered if his wealth had not made him free, but a target. The house felt cavernous after Dennis and Wendy left, the echo of the slammed door vibrating through Lester's chest long after their footsteps faded. He stood in the silence, hands pressed to the desk, staring at the contracts that were supposed to symbolize liberation. 32 million. Freedom, security, a legacy. And yet, tonight it felt like a ransom note written in his own blood. He poured himself a small measure of bourbon, the kind he'd been saving for someday, and lowered into the leather chair. The liquor burned, but it didn't steady him. His son's words replayed in the back of his mind. "I'm asking for what's mine." What had he done wrong? He had raised Dennis with every advantage: private schools, a home filled with books and possibility, a father who built stability from nothing. But perhaps, in chasing fortune, he had raised a man who saw sacrifice only as currency owed. The phone buzzed on the desk. Lester's heart tightened, thinking it might be Dennis again. Instead, it was Jim Patterson, friend, rival, survivor of countless business wars. "Lester, you sly old fox." Jim's booming voice filled the line. 32 million! "Martha and I are bringing champagne tomorrow. Don't tell me you're backing out of the party." Lester allowed himself a smile. Jim's laughter carried the weight of 30 years of loyalty. "I wouldn't dream of it. Come at 7. When he hung up, the quiet returned, but it was a different quiet now. Less hollow, more determined. The party would go on, and it would be the kind of night that proved to Dennis, to Wendy, and to himself, that what he had built was more than money. It was community. Respect. A life that mattered. He rose and walked through the house, taking in the rooms that had seen decades of struggle and small victories. The dining room where Dennis once blew out birthday candles. The living room where a younger Lester fell asleep, on the couch with contracts balanced on his chest. Each space whispered a memory that felt sharper tonight, as if reminding him what had been lost, or stolen. At the mantel, he picked up an old photo Dennis at 10, gap-toothed and grinning, holding a baseball glove too big for his hand. The boy's eyes shone with trust. Lester set the frame down carefully, almost reverently, then whispered into the empty room. "Where did you go, son?" The bourbon glass emptied faster than he realized. He refilled it, then stopped, setting the bottle aside. He needed clarity tomorrow, not fog. As dusk fell, he stepped onto the terrace. The garden lights flickered on, throwing golden shadows across the lawn. Tomorrow this space would be filled with music and laughter, a stage for celebration. But in the dark edges of the yard, Lester felt a chill, a reminder that success had drawn not only friends, but predators. And predators often smiled like family. By late afternoon the next day, the house no longer felt like his. Crews of caterers and florists transformed every corner. Silver trays on polished tables, candlelight arranged to shimmer off crystal glasses, flowers perfuming the air. It was elegant, flawless, almost theatrical. And yet, Lester felt like an actor pacing backstage, script in hand but heart unsteady. Guests began arriving early, faces alight with admiration. Jim and Martha swept in with their booming laughter. Dr. Chen, the neighbor who had kept Lester healthy through sleepless decades, brought a bouquet as bright as her smile. Old colleagues, neighbors, partners, all congratulated him with warmth that felt almost medicinal. He raised his glass, accepted their praise, and nodded through their toasts. But beneath the glow, unease gnawed at him. Every cheer reminded him of the silence the night before, Dennis's demand, Wendy's calculating stare. At 7 sharp, headlights cut across the driveway. A sleek BMW purred to a stop. Lester's hand tightened around his glass. Dennis stepped out in a pressed suit, smile stretched thin. Wendy followed, striking in a black dress that clung like a weapon. Behind them trailed her parents, Homer and May, modest and polite, clearly overwhelmed by the grandeur. "Dad," Dennis began, his tone uncharacteristically soft, "I owe you an apology." The words startled Lester more than anger would have. He scanned his son's face, searching for sincerity. There was something there, remorse perhaps, but it wavered, fragile as glass. Then Wendy stepped closer. Her smile was warm, almost disarming. "We brought something for you," she said, pressing a small wrapped box into his hands. "Heavy, expensive. Just a token of our gratitude for including us tonight." The box weighed more than it should. Lester felt the pressure of eyes on him. Guests pausing, waiting for the scene to resolve. He forced a gracious nod, set the gift aside, and gestured them in. The party swelled with conversation. Music floated across the terrace, laughter mixing with the clink of glasses. On the surface, everything was perfect. But perfection has edges, and Lester saw them clearly now. Wendy moved gracefully among guests, asking thoughtful questions, complimenting the decor, charming even Jim. Dennis laughed in the corner, telling stories about Lester's perseverance. For a fleeting moment, it almost felt real. A son proud of his father, a daughter, in-law grateful, a family mending. Almost. From across the terrace, Wendy caught Lester's eye. The smile she gave was radiant, flawless. But it lingered too long, sharpened into something else. A smile that said, "I know what you have. And I know how to take it." For the first time in his life, Lester felt like a guest in his own home. The celebration was no longer about retirement or legacy. It had become a stage, and he wasn't sure if he was the guest of honor or the sacrifice. The terrace glowed like a scene from a magazine spread. Tables dressed in white linen, glasses gleaming, laughter floating into the warm night. From the outside it was perfect. Inside, Lester felt his chest pulled tighter with every passing minute. He kept moving, host-like, shaking hands, offering smiles, but his eyes betrayed him, constantly drawn back to Dennis and Wendy. His son was animated, talking to old colleagues with a kind of charisma Lester had never seen in him. It almost looked genuine. Yet beside him, Wendy was too precise. Her laughter measured, her compliments polished, her gaze always circling back to him. At the drinks table, The bartender stepped away to fetch another bottle. In that sliver of absence, Lester saw it. Wendy's hand moved quickly, almost elegantly, like she'd rehearsed. From her clutch, something small and metallic flickered. A packet no larger than a sugar sachet. With one smooth motion, she tilted it over a wine glass. A pale powder slid into the dark red liquid, dissolving instantly. Her eyes flicked left, then right. No one noticed. No one but Lester. Time seemed to stretch thin. He gripped the back of a chair, his pulse hammering in his ears. The glass she had tampered with sat in the exact spot where he had been standing minutes earlier. His glass. A chill swept through him, sharper than fear. This wasn't greed anymore. This was murder, dressed in silk and perfume. He forced himself to breathe, to stay steady. Wendy stirred the drink with a cocktail stick, pocketed the packet, and drifted back into the crowd with a smile so radiant that not a single guest suspected a thing. Why? The question rang in his skull. Was Dennis complicit? Or was he just a pawn in Wendy's game? Did his son know his wife had crossed the line from ambition to annihilation? The irony clawed at him. 30 years in cutthroat business had taught him to expect betrayal, but never here, never in his own family. He pressed a hand to his chest, forcing calm. He couldn't panic. Not with 50 guests, not with eyes on him, not with Wendy watching from across the room. She wanted him to drink that glass. She was waiting for it. Mr. King? A voice broke through. Martha Patterson, her eyes warm with kindness. When are you going to give us that famous toast? The room shifted toward him. Expectant faces turning. Jim raised his glass. Yes, Lester! Let's hear from the man of the hour. The poisoned wine waited on the table like a trap. Wendy's gaze was fixed. Her smile wider now, a predator's patience hidden in charm. Lester felt his throat go dry. This was the moment. To lift the glass was death. To refuse it would raise questions. For the first time all evening, he felt truly alone. Caught between the warmth of his friend's trust and the icy knowledge that one false move could end everything. He reached for the glass and paused. A glass hovered inches from Lester's lips, the ruby surface trembling under the candlelight. Around him, the terrace was hushed in anticipation. 50 voices waiting for his toast. He could feel Wendy's stare from across the table, a thread of invisible pressure pulling the glass higher. In that instant, Lester made a choice. He lowered the drink just slightly and let his voice cut through the quiet. Before we toast, he began, his tone steady but weighted. I want to talk about family. A murmur of approval rippled through the guests. Family was safe, sentimental. But Lester's eyes never left Wendy's. Family, he continued, is supposed to mean trust. Safety. The kind of bond that can't be bought or sold. His gaze shifted deliberately to Dennis, who froze mid-smile. But sometimes what you call family becomes something else. A threat. A danger. Unisi laughter stirred among the crowd. Martha Patterson tilted her head, confused. Jim's brow furrowed. Wendy's smile held, but it wavered, brittle at the edges. Lester raised the glass again, only to turn it slightly in his hand. Letting the candlelight reveal a faint swirl in the wine, he set it back down on the table. That glass, he said, voice now sharp, was meant to kill me. The words cracked across the terrace like thunder. Gasps burst from the crowd. Dennis shot to his feet. What the hell are you talking about? Lester pointed. Not to Wendy, not yet. But to the wine. I watched it happen. A powder poured in when no one was looking. No one except me. The guests recoiled, eyes darting between the untouched glass and Wendy. For the first time that evening, her mask faltered completely. Her hand twitched at her clutch, as if searching for an escape that didn't exist. Dad, that's insane. Dennis stammered, though his voice cracked with doubt. He looked at Wendy, searching for denial, for reassurance. But she didn't meet his eyes. Instead, she lunged forward suddenly, hand striking the glass. It toppled, shattered on the stone terrace, red wine bleeding like spilled blood. The room erupted in gasps and cries. How convenient, Lester said, his tone low, merciless. The evidence, destroyed in one clumsy gesture. The Wendy's face drained of color. You're imagining things. It was an accident. But no one believed her now. The silence from the guests was louder than any accusation. Even Dennis stepped back from her, his jaw slack, betrayal dawning. You used me, he whispered. the words landing heavier than any blow. Homer, Wendy's father, reached for the table to steady himself, his eyes wide with grief. May pressed trembling hands to her mouth. Lester stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had fought too many battles to be fooled now. You didn't just try to kill me, Wendy. You nearly poisoned your own father. The terrace fell utterly silent, the horror complete. Wendy's mask finally shattered, no charm, no calculation. Only the naked desperation of someone exposed. And in that silence, the truth stood naked among the shards of broken glass. The terrace was frozen in silence, save for the faint crackle of candles and the drip of wine seeping into the stone. 50 guests stood motionless, as if afraid that movement would shatter what was left of the night. Wendy's mascara streaked down her face, her voice shrill and breaking. This is all a lie. He's twisting everything. But no one stepped forward to defend her. Not Dennis. Not her parents. Not even the friends she'd charmed so effortlessly an hour earlier. Homer's voice cracked the air like brittle wood. Wendy, he whispered, his throat tight with grief, what have you done? His eyes brimmed with tears, not of anger, but of a father recognizing something monstrous in his child. May clutched his arm, her sobs muffled, her shoulders collapsing beneath the truth. Wendy's eyes darted wildly, calculating exits, but every door seemed sealed by the weight of 50 accusing stares. Finally, she spat out the only weapon left to her. Venom. You'll regret this, Lester. All of you. You think you've won? Her heels clicked like gunshots as she stormed through the house, each step unraveling the illusion of grace she had so carefully worn. The front door slammed, the echo vibrating through the night like a final gunshot. A car engine roared, tires screeched, and then she was gone. The silence she left behind was heavier than her presence had ever been. Dennis remained, motionless, pale. His eyes never rose from the shattered glass on the floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow, strangled. Dad, I didn't know. Lester studied him. For once there was no anger in his chest, only exhaustion, and an ache deeper than bone. Not knowing, he said quietly, isn't the same as being innocent. You let her speak for you until you couldn't hear yourself anymore. Dennis flinched, as if struck. He looked around, saw the faces that had turned away. The father who had drawn a line, the life he had nearly lost by tethering himself to greed. And with no words left, he walked into the night after her. Not running, not chasing, but drifting like a man who no longer knew where he belonged. The party did not end so much as dissolve. Guests left in murmurs, some with hugs, others with silence. Friends squeezed Lester's shoulder with quiet admiration, not for his wealth but for his clarity. By the time the last car pulled away, only Homer and May remained, standing awkwardly amid the wreckage of shattered glass and poisoned wine. Homer bowed his head. You saved my life tonight. And you saved me from believing a lie I should have seen years ago. For that, I can never thank you enough. Lester placed a steady hand on his shoulder. What happened tonight was her choice, not yours. Blood doesn't make someone family, loyalty does. Later, alone on the terrace, Lester stood among the empty glasses and the glittering shards. The garden lights flickered across the broken wine, the dark stains spreading like a shadow across stone. 32 million sat secured in contracts. But in this silence, Lester finally understood the cost of building an empire, the loss of a son, the near loss of his own life. The revelation that some inheritances are poisoned long before they touch a glass. He lifted a fresh drink, untouched, safe, and raised it to the night sky. Not to wealth, not to legacy, but to the family who stayed when lies collapsed, and to the peace that comes only after truth has burned everything false away. And in the quiet that followed, Lester knew freedom had finally arrived.